Thank you. Anyone got any questions? Or could the artists whose works are in here, Brian, Josh, just come on. No, you don't have to. Fiona, she's going to go, no, anymore. Oh. Very special people. Yes, Joan.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you slide from frontal portraits into around the head to the back? And what was that process? Did you start originally with drawn faces?
Although I did blur them often, if you remember, with watercolour. Look, I don't know, and one of the things of going to university is we were made to articulate. I often think artists think without consciousness. There's a subconscious will, there's an instinct. And it's not good enough in a university context to say, oh, I just felt like drawing that. I don't know. You've got to understand why, and you've got to also say, what am I contributing to the conversation that is art? Art is a conversation between humans. One says something some way, something politically happens, or spiritually, someone adds to that, someone adds to that. That's constantly why things are moving. Yes, I'm coming back to your question, but I did find that we were made to say, what are you saying? Why are you saying it? And what are you asking of the viewer when they look? And that's quite hard if you're a visceral, instinctive person. I did find that very hard. I found the essay writing very hard. So what I think I have found is that I am very passionate about human beings and empathy in particular, and how the cruelty of humans from one to another, the notion of selfishness, and if I'm all right, I will make my world around me okay at your expense. And I also found that I was, probably even as a little girl, an isolated observer of things. I didn't feel connected much to things, so I went into my own world. So human beings, to look at the back of a human being, to me says their life is in front of them. And I like that. I like the mystery. Who is that? What is in front of her or him? And what do they behold? Also, if you see their face, I find that you often judge somebody on signals of expression or shape of nose or eye colour, and I wanted to make the judgment mysterious as well, because it's another thing I feel we do judge each other as human beings. We judge so quickly of what's right, what's wrong, what's colour, what type, how you move, all those things. And I know they're important social signals, and hair is an incredibly important social signal. I actually learned through 2 doctors of anthropology from Goldsmiths University that hair has a most incredible social context. For example, when slaves were bought and sold by the English in Nigeria, they were graded in 4 sections, A, B, C, and D, and within those sections there was 1, 2, 3, and 4. A1 was the least curly hair. They got the most money. A slave who had the curliest hair was the cheapest. Why is that? What is that about? Why do African Americans and English, African and many other countries, black-skinned usually with the curly hair, and I know why, because the cellular structure is different, that's a whole other thing, but they spend billions trying to straighten their hair to emulate the privileged white person. So we manage it, we have bad hair days, we have bad mind days, we try and organise it, we get it done to present ourselves to the world. So this is another added factor that I discovered in my studies there that made me realise why I find it so endlessly fascinating. And of course you can see the most hair when somebody's turned around. So that's a very long answer.
No, it's
And I also think it's a joy for a drawer. It's just line after line after line after line. It's just, and it never stops. So, and the way they sheen light, and and it's about the human being, and I find human beings quite interesting to draw.
Is there a significance in the negatives?
Pardon?
Is there a significance in the negative?
That's a very arty word. It's the materiality. I loved the way pencil reflected off black compared to drawing on white, and I found it also easier to highlight with the positive stroke rather than when you draw light and shade on white paper. You have to leave the paper blank where you want the highlighted parts, as you know. So I found it quite opposite. It was a bit like reversing a truck. I could go back to what was to making the highlight the mark. So I loved trying that, and I loved what happened with the pencil on the black paper. Actually, this particular one, well, since we're here, this was a work that I did that was chosen for a thing called Exhibit, which was the best of the universities. They select works every year. And this was the first work that I did using that, and I loved it, and I noticed others loved it, and it changed as you moved because the light moves over it, and I added the colour. And from that little work, I was in Vanity Fair and blah, 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 and I had this extraordinary opportunity of meeting Frances Morris, the director of Tate Modern, to sit with her for an hour and just talk about art. I'm very happy to tell you what she said if you're interested. So I found that this thing that I had just sort of happed upon in trying with hair is something that gave me more joy, and maybe others as well. So I do quite like the negative. I do quite like the blackness. I know they're hard to own, hard to live with, but I like that as far as a journey of this conversation that I'm having with drawing. Mm-hmm.
What was the purpose of the articulation in that? Because wasn't the works, the articulation, as you said, the subconscious? So I guess it's, we make visible the invisible, which is the expression of the conscious. So wouldn't you, I don't know, I can see you could corrupt the articulation in the sense of trying to give words to it, because sometimes there is no description because it's actually read by the subconscious or by the soul.
Okay.
That's the difference between the pixel and the graphite.
Yes.
Is the actual, the depth
Yes.
of the soul that comes through.
Yes.
And isn't that the gift that you give to
Yes.
humanity? So I'm wondering why.
Oh, yeah, I've got so much to say, I'm sorry, because I thought my gut was getting sullied by my intellect, by the teaching. I was losing, if you analyse things too much, you lose the thing that possibly makes someone else feel. You lose a feeling. It becomes a thinking, not a feeling. Now, I don't know if anyone here has heard, but there's a very large movement called outsider art, and it came from a man called Prinzhorn, a psychiatrist who had an infirmary in the 40s in Europe, and he gave his patients, who were probably put in there for a lot of many different reasons, as psychiatry was in the 40s. Thank you, Freud. He gave them pencils and paper and encouraged them to draw. Now, they had no art training, but these incredible works came out of just feeling and thinking. And in fact, David Bowie was a huge collector of outsider art. And when Imam, his wife, sold his collection a couple of years ago at Sotheby's, most of them were outsider art. I'm getting to that because then one of my papers was about how do you keep the outsider but also engage intellectually. And because I went to a university, not a college, not an art school, it was a university, and British universities have very high standards with which to maintain for their students to remain as university status. If they don't have university status, they don't get their funding. So they have a very high degree of making a very complex intellectual conversation that will move forward. So yes, I had to study that, and one of my papers was how do you silo the artist, how do you silo the little girl who just wants to do something, that when someone else sees it, like your work, Jo, when I see that, I just feel nothing, I just feel, I don't think about it, how do you keep that as well as getting a distinction in a thesis with all that work? So my mechanism was I tried to silo them. I made a picture in my mind. I siloed the instinct and I worked hard in the other silo. That was fine, that can do it anytime. But the other, and don't you let the intellectual impact on your soul. And I found it's really quite hard. And I will tell you about Frances Morris because she took over from a wonderful director at Tate Modern who'd been there many years, whose name I can't think of right this minute. And it was a hard act to follow. She's been there 2 years, and she thinks that art has become, mostly because of the modernists, that people are made to feel stupid if they don't understand it. It's become so context and intellectually oriented that it's now divorcing those from engaging with it unless they too have done those studies. And she is trying now to reverse that with Tate Modern, which I found both in weaving, in fibre works, in drawing and retrospectives, and I also learned how the financial arrangements work with Tate Modern, and they're up against a lot of restrictions, the major art institutions, of what they have to show, and they'll always throw in a Picasso because they need the money to then do something that's a little bit the current flavour. So it's a really good question, and I don't know whether study is the answer to doing good art. Woohoo! Yes! Yeah! Yeah, Josh.
I have another question, but this seems to lead into the question that's just not quite there yet, but can you extrapolate it all? I was quite interested in the one that you showed from your studies of the guy who did the table.
Oh, yep, the table in Greece, yep.
Like that very conceptual nature
Yep.
of art that
Yep.
is so hot right now, or has been so hot for so long. And our traditional understandings of what drawing is,
Yep.
the blowing up the kids' drawing,
Yep.
like, can you extrapolate a little bit like what we're talking about, the intellect and the gut, extrapolate the tension between those two, as you just put it, siloed
Yep.
aspects of...
Extrapolate it in Klaus Mozartig's
No,
work, or my own, or in general?
Just generally, it's a very muddy question.
It's a really muddy question, because actually I think everybody, just as every artist has their own way, I think every viewer has their own way. That particular work for me just made me, everything just, it just did it for me. The notion of the joy of I found it hilarious that the complete freedom of a 3-year-old suddenly is in this huge thing in a high-end art context, done by his father, but in a beautiful, honoured way as well, in a skilled way, and yet that innocence was evident. So I found that, for me, I found that really interesting, that the two things collided in that. The Greek, the tabletop, I knew that every mark that he was making, he knew that there was a person who had made a fingerprint or a mark on that table in a desperate attempt to get a better life, and I'm interested in those things about humans. So to me, again, I thought, plus it didn't slap you in the face, it was a way of showing incredible empathy, to want to spend the amount of time he did on recreating a tabletop from that context, perfectly, or not perfectly, it doesn't matter. The fact that one artist saw that as interesting enough also says to me, that interests me too. And the fact that you have done that, again, same thing, two things collided for me. And I just think his work, but that's very personal. And all this that I have said is also just my view on what happened and what I learned. Everyone else would have something different.
The intellect rather than the soul that you're talking about. I mean, if you didn't know the background of that tabletop and just had the tabletop,
I still loved it.
And the child's drawing, would your response be different?
Great question. I went over to find out what they were because I had a visceral response to those works. And then I found out what they were, and all it did was make it grow. Now, why did I sense that? What is that funny conversation that happens in the ether between an object and a person, or a person and a person, that you can't, I don't know why, John, yeah.
It's emotion in the drawing.
Pardon?
It's emotion in the drawing.
Well, yes.
That's why I asked you about those, because there's a sense that there's emotion in them, where it isn't in the black and white or white.
Right.
It is in the white.
Yes,
on
that's this one here, you mean? Oh, just black on white, not that work. Oh, I see, yeah.
So in these, you've got a sense of, I can just make things up, like you're following, or,
Or people are walking away from me. That's,
Well,
I was wondering about that.
No, I don't want to go into
No,
that,
yep.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But there's some emotion in it, I think, in those.
Well, but thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment. I don't know if it is, but
I only said it because of what you said about those other two drawings. You saw the emotion.
maybe I did or felt it. And I just find it extraordinary how one can, and every viewer of any artwork will have a completely different interpretation of that artwork than even the artist intended. I also find that fantastically, it's a kind of a gift. Artists are giving someone a gift to make them think and feel, and then they walk away. It's just the most lovely. It's not particularly financially lucrative, but the soul gets a lot of joy and gravitas out of that. Yeah.
So a similar thing is at the heart of the Rorschach test in psychiatry.
I can't hear, John, sorry.
A similar dichotomy is at the heart of the use of the Rorschach test in psychiatry, where you basically have an Inkblot.
Yes. And it's very hard, I don't know about anyone else, but it's very hard not to look at an Inkblot and not try to find something in there, isn't it? A meaning, or, oh, it's a butterfly, no, it's not, oh, no, it's angry, or it's these little signals that images give us.
So I'm really interested in the idea of thinking and feeling in the artist's process. So, and in a way it doesn't really matter probably, but I wonder, is it the thought that happens first or the feeling that happens first that propels you to make that first mark?
I think there's got to be quite a lot of feeling to keep you committed to the time duration of execution. You've got to have something that keeps you alive, the drive alive to complete or keep working on something. I know Robbie's work, she says she gets into this meditative state and finds that like a flow where time means nothing anymore. Gamers often talk about that, where they get into the flow state, where there's nothing else matters and you've got no linear time, but you're in a zone. And she finds that with her drawing. I do too a bit, although personally for me, Parliament is always sitting, oh, is that good enough? No, that's not. Oh, just stop it. Just do it. No, try it. Doesn't matter. It's only a piece of paper. I'll throw it away if it doesn't work. No, oh, no, it's looking quite good. I might stand back. Oh, that's quite, oh, but don't think about it because I've got to let the, so constantly Parliament is sitting and I try to dull that down. But I do think the emotion needs to keep, look, again, everyone will have different motivations for why they draw or paint or sculpt or make or write, or we're kind of storytellers though, aren't we, human beings? Mm.
The art is primary. The reflexive moment in intellectualising about it is secondary, which is why you can't get to the primary from the secondary.
You can't get to the primary from
the intellectualisation.
But they'd give it a red hot go though. And I did quite like though the idea of what are you contributing, knowing what you're contributing, and you've kind of got to understand what somebody else. I mean, this self and other thing that I got involved with, that led me to, I was directed then to philosophers that I had never read Merleau-Ponty, and then the Unheimlich, the horror of the known, which is hair that Freud invented. You know, nothing as scary as the hair that you find under your mother's bed, the homely, the unhomely. So that all that intellectualizing of psychological states I also found interesting. But yes, it's only at this level of talk. It doesn't happen in here for some reason. Yeah, the primary still has to be there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Lately I've become very obsessed with maps and aerial landscapes and that sort of thing. And something really clicked there when you started talking about maps, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a map of the landscape.
No.
It can be a map of the self. Is that something that perhaps thinking of the concept of the self as a map, is that restrictive, or like maybe for me, as I said, I've become map obsessed. I'm driving my family crazy.
You mean maps of family, maps of place? Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$350 for a 2-metre map of the world that my husband just looked at and went, what the? So, and you just made me realise that I have become really quite focused on maps and making my own maps. I've been making sort of like aerial maps and using different textures and actually single-use plastic to kind of make textures that make look like a landscape, and I'm using like gel mediums and plonking butter containers in gel mediums and that sort of thing. I'm trying to find different ways to, and I don't expect you to answer the question,
Yeah.
but I have been wondering, why am I doing this?
My answer would be suddenly you've got some thread with which to find context for yourself, maybe. I don't know. But see, this map, Alex's map here of Ireland, well, it's the shape of Ireland, but none of the names of everything there is anything about what some cartographer, it's actually about what she felt there.
Yeah.
So that you can do a map of, also, I could actually do a map of the relationship that I have with all the artists in this room. Some of them I've known for 40 years, some I never met, only on Instagram. Brian, we met on Instagram. I loved his work. I went to London to see some works of his that he'd been on a thing. I mean, I can draw this little map and go, whoa, down to here, and then, I came to there, and then I met Jeanette there. I mean, I can actually draw that map. And does it make... oh, good, that's so good.
As I said, I've got these paintings that I wanted to put texture into, but I couldn't find anything interesting, so I literally went through the recycle bin and started painting on that and imprinting, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
that's the chicken tray, that's the butter dish,
Yep.
that's,
Yep.
and then rubbing over the top of them. So the concept of
It's a very big thing, though, for human beings to map, as you know. I mean, very big. Everywhere, about everything, yeah. So it's kind of quite natural. Go with it. Yeah.
well, $350 for the map of the world is just gorgeous. And,
Fantastic. And isn't the world an amazing place? Now, is it political lines or is it geographical? And then there's a whole... But Tanya, who taught me, she did an extraordinary thing with maps. She had a globe. She made a copper outline of the shape of the oceans, not the land. Took the globe away, so these bowls with strange lines and shapes of every ocean she then laid out as an art piece. So there's these huge bowls, but they're actually the maps of the ocean. So suddenly you go, oh yeah, we're also fixated on the land we stand in. So through her way of wanting to express her love of the world, she mapped in sculpture, but she'll call it a drawing and I call it a drawing. She drew the oceans. So there's just a million ways to, but it's a very big drive for us to map things and look at maps in different ways. And so it's, yeah.
Photography in itself is such a broad field because
Photography.
cartography.
Oh, cartography. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Maps are not necessarily just for geography, they're for wildlife flow, they're for
Yep.
vegetation, they're for water flow, they're for
People flow, they're for mind flow. I remember that, what was that program we used to love, Pete, in when interactive media came in, where you'd put a square next to a square and that would go to there and that would go to there. Don't use it anymore. It's just, we use it like crazy, especially for interactive media, that you click on that and it goes to that, and when you click on that and that's available there, and it's just mapping. It's just mapping information. Mm. Not an art person.
My daughter studies art. Just a mum.
Yay, mums! Biggest job.
You call that, to me, that head is the sculpture.
Yep.
How or why do you call it a drawing?
Because the way I made it, which only I know, the lines with which, so I made it out of flat fabric. One of the pieces is an old nightie of mine. It's actually the bottom piece. I then used plaster. I had a friend, actually Sepideh Kalali, who's the Iranian artist whose work is behind there. I needed help to do it, so it became an activity that I called, we were drawing the same work together to see what would happen. I don't know why. Did I do a drawing of it? No, that's the drawing. That is the drawing. Yeah. For me, that's a drawing. I can't explain. I think everything, I mean, when I paint, I just draw with paint. So I think this is why there's so much analysis of what people call drawing. It isn't just a piece of paper and a pencil, and it's just, I'm drawing a three-dimensional space to get across an idea that I can't express any other way than that, and that says it all to me. But to me, I've drawn it because I pulled the fabric, I drew down the. I mean, there's all the things. It's called it drawing strength, and you draw breath, you draw. And there's this wonderful word, but of course there's dessin in French, which is like our design is the word for draw, and graphite. Graph is from Latin. So there's this word drawing is it's a very English notion of the way we draw something out, and I call myself a drawer, but that's also a drawer. That's what you pull out and put your undies in as well. So I'm a drawer. I just said sorry.
You call it a drawing because it's something that you drew out yourself?
Maybe. Yeah, I just think it's just not, instead of it being a flat drawing, it's just a three-dimensional drawing. Yeah. It's just kind of loose terminology that I'm.
To manipulate the lines
By hand.
that have occurred there.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
perhaps in the same way that
That's right. I pulled out and I folded and I tucked, and the same way you would do on any piece of yeah.
Perhaps it's got something to do with the capacity for humans to categorise.
Well, yes.
And really, humans do like, and the human mind likes
Yeah.
things to be organised and labelled, and so
Geoffrey Blaney had some wonderful words to say. He said it's easier for us to retain concepts if we can categorise them and put them in. Personally, I like to undo those. I'm not a big fan of categorising.
Yeah.
I can't actually answer that question, actually, to be truthful. To me, it's a drawing.
But
Yeah.
maybe there's something about the fact that, you know, we look, well, someone might look at that and think that's a sculpture, and then to be told that that's a drawing just does something to our head immediately. Like it's
Something good or
pushing-
bad?
It's pushing our boundaries, like it's breaking those categorisations and forcing a new reaction. You know that
Yes.
great phrase, a mind that's been exposed to a new idea will never return to its original
Oh,
shape.
yeah.
That
Good.
Can you tell me what you were thinking when you incorporated the word strength?
When I
Incorporated the word strength.
because I think drawing's incredibly strong, and I think maybe it was a reaction to some people see drawing as a weaker art. I know, in fact, last week a major gallery told me they're dropping drawings; they don't sell. Incredible disappointment because I found that, well, because I love drawing for a start. But I found in Europe and London where I was and what I experienced, admittedly it was a closed drawing focused thing, but the Gagosian has, look, that's another drawing of mine that made it into, this is a piece of neon at White Cube. That is the same thing. Now you see, I see that as a drawing, some people call that sculpting. That is Gareth Wynne Evans, made in neon. But to me that is one of the most, and as you walked around you got given another drawing and another drawing and another drawing because it changed shape. This is Glenn Brown who draws masters in other ways. This is the one I wanted to show you. This is Richard Serra's black drawings. This is at the Gagosian. That's just a solid piece of ink on beautiful thick paper and oil pastel, and it sort of bled the oil when you look up close. So the notion again of what is, it's just valued that the Gagosian is probably one of the most incredible art conglomerates in the world. They will show drawings. So I'm saddened here that it's not seen as quite a strong value, so I called it Drawing Strength.
It's a very evocative title, I think, because just even in terms of like the notion of communicating with the unconscious and the soul, so it's a very
Great.
evocative,
Yep.
you know, from where we draw strength.
Yes.
That actually comes through that then allows us to communicate on other dimensions. I think is what you know, referred to when you were drawn to that refugee table.
Yes.
You know, because it was something that drew you, which was
Yes.
on other
See, we
planets.
will use the word draw in many ways, don't we? Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully we're not bound by how people hold it in the bigger world. You know,
Never be bound by anything. Yeah. Just your own morals. That's all we need to be bound by.
It's dropped from a gallery's big deal. You know, 'cause
Oh yeah. I mean, it said to me, that said more about him. I went, well, you don't understand artists.
yeah.
But he has to make a living. And galleries are finding it tough. It's kind of changed the art context and the old gallerist, and it's changed. We can make our own exhibitions. We can work with people to share costs. It's changed. I feel for gallerists actually, and you know they charge up to 50%, and the artist has to frame the work. And they've got to do their job for the artist to come, and they have to work bloody hard. And often they have a set of collectors, and in Australia that's small compared to Europe and UK, and they've got to make a living, and they've got to pay the rent, and they've got to put the drinks on at the opening, and so it's not easy. So when he said they're just not selling, I was sad, but I thought to me, I just thought, oh, you're kind of a lesser gallerist then, because you got to kind of take the risk for art sometimes, just to, but doesn't exist in Europe and UK. It's just a given. It's just it's an exciting, not only that, it's like exciting. Wow, we've never really thought about drawing like this. It's starting to become quite exciting. And achievable and available. I think that's why the Menor collection just loved it. And the works that they could get by artists for such a smaller price that they found incredibly stimulating and exciting. It's like, yes!
What do you think sparked that change in Europe, and how long has it been? How long has that?
Yeah, that I can't answer, but I reckon it's about eight years that it's been seen as mighty conversations for humans to have. It's egalitarian, anyone can do it, it's accessible, people can kind of understand a drawing. It's used, as I said, in every form of fashion, architecture, scribbling, doodling, expression. It's available to everyone.
Why do you think the definition of it has expanded so much?
Well, I think it's also time, because I know life drawing was dropped from Camberwell, which had a very long history, Camberwell University in London, very long history about doing life drawing. That's why I put a wall, and then this conceptual art. You can actually do a piece of artwork with.
Tension, sorry to interrupt.
No.
The tension I was alluding to between this long history of tradition about what drawing is in art school is always understood as from the model, realistic, blah blah blah, and in maybe the last 10.
But Josh, this is the evolving conversation.
It's evolving, yeah.
Absolutely, and it'll probably fall out of favour, and something else will. I mean,
I'm just
yeah. I feel like.
This fancy understanding.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
do some rubbings on a table.
Yeah.
Whereas 50 years ago, you wouldn't have done that.
No, absolutely. And 50 years hence, there'll be all sorts of other things. Yeah. But the ability to draw. Well, the other thing I thought children lost the joy because teachers taught it out of them. What I did learn was that it's not that. They express and do these wonderful things, which Thomas Mossady clearly made a big drawing of. But as a child is beginning to, is my understanding from the people I spoke to who study in this field there, as a child's mind grows, they become more and more aware of their surroundings. They will start to try to draw a tree properly, not the idea of a tree. And that's a natural thing. It's not teachers going, no, that's not a very good tree. It's got to have a branch here. That's not just that. It's even children given complete freedom and adored for their gestural works will still start to try to have a conversation with the real world in their drawing.
And that's probably the same as their ability, they want to perfect language.
Same thing, absolutely, yeah. And it is a language. Drawing is a language. It's just a visual language. Exactly, it's linguistic. Yep.
We're just studying Auslan at the moment, and that's it's obviously a totally visual language.
Yeah.
And it's funny, a lot of the concepts between what you're talking about with drawing and Auslan, they run very similarly.
Do they?
Well, it's very interpretive.
Yep.
It can't be written down. It can't be. It evolves constantly.
Yes.
One sign can mean 5 different things.
Yes.
You can interpret it as 5 different things, and we can look at one of your drawings and see. You might see walking away. I might see me backing away from somebody.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Following somebody.
Yeah. Yes, Lind.
This is not so much a question, but perhaps a point of inspiration, like you said, and it might help the mother figure out what you mean by drawing, because I actually initially disagreed with your concept of your sculpture as a drawing. You made me think about it though, and that what is drawing? Well, if drawing has synonyms like sketch,
Yep.
maquetting, sculpting,
Yep.
and I realized that in my career, I'm asked every day, can you sketch this idea for me in architecture? How, like, a person will ask of me, I need you to tell me what you mean or illustrate how I realised that, well, all of these things that can be synonymized with drawings are just the required medium to express what is in your head. How do you convey that to the person of whom it is intended?
Because we don't have a, this is what I mean, plug, get it out and plug it into some. So this is one of the reasons why it's so seen as so explosive. It's the first mark made into the real world from an imagined world that only exists in somebody's mind. It's ethereal, it does not exist anywhere but in one person's mind. And a drawing is the first mark where that idea leaps into the real world, as tiny as that is, or as complex as that is. And that's the current thinking, the intellectual thinking about drawing. It's the first realization. So that was an idea, and I just drew it into reality. I saw it in my head, and I worked it till it became a thing that was I could feel. And other people could as well. So yes, yep. The highlights on that drawing particularly. I have a rubber that is rectangular. How can I describe it? So it's rectangular and fine. And when you do that, it takes it lifts off in a line the graphite. So I can draw something in a smudge and then go with this, and suddenly there's this white line. So not only do I rub out because there's something I don't like, I actually rub out for purpose.
Because in this one over here, there's that
the hands,
yeah. The elbows, the way it kind of devolves. And when I look at that, I feel like that's all original marks. Like there's
well, they are, that one. And actually the smudgy around her head is the smudges from my hand, because people like to put pieces of, but I actually quite like that being part of the fact that I had to walk, I got graphite all over the pudgy bit, and it, yeah. So look, and only I knew that, well you all know that now too, but I go, oh, it's a bit dirty around there. But I actually find that as part of the process that I quite like. But that one, I will let go. That's what I was trying to think. That's a battle between thinking of being perfect and let go. So that's why it's called thinking hands. I was trying to just, and I did. I just squiggle. And then then the next drama is, should I stop now? Or will I do one more? Oh, I've gone too far. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, very, very, very much. It's just been great.